This is Doc Ock here, coming at you live and direct from Black Facts Headquarters Central this evening. Great to be here. Hope everybody's on the one. I'm trying to be on the one as well, because I hate it when I'm on the two. Please always remember, we need you to go ahead and give us a like and a thumbs up, and then subscribe to the Tubular Black Facts channel. And while you're at it, please go ahead and invite some of your friends, your family, and even a good enemy. If you like, turn your enemy into a frenemy. So we're going to jump right into it here, because we need to get on with the getting on tonight. And we're going to recite our Kiswahili proverb of the day. You know what? I think I'm going to use the same one I used earlier today. Mtoto wa nyoka ni nyoka. Mtoto wa nyoka ni nyoka. The child of a snake is a snake. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. The child of a snake is a snake, and we say it in the Kiswahili language, Mtoto wa nyoka ni nyoka. Yes, yes, yes. Very good proverb to keep in mind at all times. The child of a snake is a snake. Yep. And snakes are going to do what snakes are going to do. Now, as for our story for tonight, the chapter tonight from the book Never Caught, the story of Ona Judge, an enslaved African who escapes from the clutches of Martha and George Washington. And this part here is called Surviving. So we know there's going to be something exciting must be going to happen in this chapter. Let's see how long it is. Oh, it's not too long. We should be able to finish this one tonight. Let's see what we can do. In many ways, New York City, the Big Apple. New York, New York, the Big Apple. In 1789 had the same definable characteristic it does today. It was a city so encompassing that within it was the best of everything and the worst of everything. Back then, this characteristic meant that it was hard to figure out what to trust, what to expect, what to value. Just like a young child learning a new language, the words, the meanings, the rules. The United States needed to learn the meanings and rules of a constitution that said everyone was born equal and deserving of the same rights, while upholding a system where some humans were definitely not equal and did not have the same rights. It was going to take a long time. Meanwhile, New York City, out of all the cities in the new country, was probably the most exciting city of all. And it was also the most glaring example of what happened when a new country hadn't figured things out yet. Let me just type something in here real quick. Excuse me. Un momentito, por favor. Always got to keep up with the equipment. Let's see if that does it. All right. It had rich residents like Governor Clinton. It had the desperately poor, like some of the white servants coming to work for the Washingtons. It had the educated classes, people like Aaron Burr, the future vice president who had graduated from Princeton University. And, of course, it had Alexander Hamilton. That's right, the very same one they did the play about. The future Secretary of the Treasury and founder of the New York Post, who had graduated from King's College, now called Columbia University. And it had people, even besides the enslaved, who had never gone to school, not even for a day. It had abolitionists who were part of the New York Manumission Society. Manumission is what happens when a slave owner frees his slaves. But many of these abolitionists were slave owners. Escaped slaves hid in the busy cities, dark corners, and alleyways, hopeful for a job where their identity would not be discovered. Free blacks worked any jobs they could get, which were not many. Social climbing, rich white people owned slaves to make them feel more important and to benefit from their labor. Many free black men and women lived proudly and publicly, even forming their own clubs and organizations that fought for the reputation and credibility of the black people who lived in New York City. Everything was in upheaval: the laws, the customs, even the location for the new federal government. Over the next 18 months, life as Ona knew it would be thrown up into the air and juggled. It would not settle into a routine again for many, many months. On her first day in New York City, Martha Washington, 58 years old, went straight to a dinner. Ona would have dressed her and fixed her hair. Again, Anne made sure her shoes did not have any clumps of dirt on her heels or anything else that you wouldn't want to bring with you to an affair, and that her corset was suitably tight. She may have accompanied her owner to the dinner, even though Ona, if not Martha, was probably exhausted. One of the reasons why Martha was able to engage in so many social activities, perhaps her innate energy was, besides her innate energy, was Ona. Like a thermometer, permanently set on calm, Ona was the constant mood regulator for Martha, who was allowed to act however she wanted. To be sad, to be angry, to snap at somebody, to be cool and icy, to be exuberant. Ona was there to help Martha on whatever ruffled emotional ocean she was traveling. This was what differentiated Ona from someone like her sister-in-law, Charlotte, who could not stop herself from lashing out at the estate manager and at slavery in general. Ona's ability not to lose her cool, along with her intelligence and bravery, would become even more important to Martha in the days ahead. In 1789, not even a month after Martha arrived in New York City, a potential calamity struck. George Washington, 57 years old, became very sick. In some ways, it was strange that he hadn't gotten ill earlier. This was a world where the average lifespan was between 35 and 45 years old. George had been a soldier for most of his adult life. Difficult and often unclean conditions at war, as well as his advancing age, had taken their toll on George's body. When he came down with a fever in June, it didn't just go away. Instead, it lasted, and with it, a tumor grew on his left leg. Soon he was in such pain that he couldn't move. By June 17th, the well-respected New York doctor, Samuel Bard, had no choice but to operate on the president's leg. Oh, shucks. That's not going to be good. Not back in those days. You didn't want nobody to operate because usually they just cut that part off. It was a nerve-wracking time for everyone inside the house, and undoubtedly for those people aware of his sickness on the outside. The beginning of anything brings anxiety. The beginning of the U.S. was no different. George Washington was the president who everyone seemed to want to be in charge, and for him not to survive would have been seen as catastrophic. The household decided to keep his sickness a secret, and this made a terrible situation even worse. The first president of the U.S., seriously ill and having to keep up the pretense that he was healthy, was difficult for everyone who lived with him, Ona included. Martha was already unhappy to be in New York. To be there with a sick husband triggered every one of her anxieties. Her reliance on Ona intensified. Ona plunged into the foreign world of the North, would have no opportunity to do anything but wait on Martha, who was waiting on George. Throughout the next several months, it was unclear whether he would survive. At first, the household had no idea what to do. Yet, life did go on. There were clothes to be sewn and hair to be combed and grandchildren who needed activities and schooling and stuff like that. Food supplies needed to be obtained from the nearest market. Shoes had to be fixed. In New York, it was not as easy as sending the shoes to the shoemaker. or going to the grist mill to get flour. All these kinds of supplies needed to be purchased and carried and sorted. The slaves and servants had to figure this out in the unfamiliar, confusing, busy beehive of activity known as New York City, and as usual, they did. George survived because of a combination of good medical care, his natural good health, and most of all, sheer luck. That's right, I said it, sheer luck. Still, it took him a long time to recover, the entire fall and much of the winter. It wasn't until February 1790 that he was able to resume his presidential schedule. It's hard to imagine Ona's confusion during her first winter in the North. New York snowfalls can be brutally cold, even dangerous. She undoubtedly slipped on that slick cobblestone streets and iced over by the freezing rain. She certainly shivered when she found herself outside without a warm enough coat. What's she doing outside without a warm enough coat? Girl, you better get yourself a coat. And she unquestionably felt the cold wind through the window sashes of the bedroom she shared with Ma, way up in the attic on Cherry Street. Maybe she discovered that one of the good things about the house being so crowded was that it helped to warm things up a bit during the winter. As George grew stronger, Martha resumed the whirlwind of New York life. Very few people besides Ona and George knew Martha's true feelings. She served and served well as the president's social partner, an ideal image of grace and respectability, unlike George, who was not comfortable socializing with strangers. Martha would open the house on Cherry Street to her female friends and acquaintances at 7 o'clock in the evening, serving tea, coffee, lemonade, and some ice cream too. No, she didn't make none of that, but at any rate, these evenings could go on until 10 o'clock. On Thursdays, as George continued to get better, he and Martha began to host formal dinners that had to include people from all walks of political life, foreign ministers, senators, congressmen, as well as cabinet members were invited to wine and to dine. And it was Martha who had to keep the conversation moving and upbeat. Ona would have looked forward to the Washington's social occasions, as it would have given her a chance to be by herself. Okay, interesting. At Mount Vernon, she would have been able to escape at night back to the slave quarters to be with her mama and her siblings. In New York, that wasn't an option. She was always surrounded by people. When George had finally recovered, and when her being surrounded by people means that they're going to ask her to do something. Don't just stand around looking like a bump on a log, in other words. When George had fully recovered, the household moved to a bigger home nearby. At 3941 Broadway, this house had views of the Hudson River, fine carpets, and beautiful furniture. Of course, the burden of moving. Remember, this was before moving vans and dollies and U-Haul. All of that work fell on the slaves. It's hard to think about Ona, her full skirts, tangling up her every move, carrying heavy crates downstairs and upstairs. Once they were in the new house, Ona probably tried again to settle into a routine in the morning, perhaps escorting Nellie to Mrs. Graham's school on Maiden Lane, the same street where Thomas Jefferson lived. In the evening, sewing and cleaning Martha's dresses at night, preparing Martha for whatever may come in terms of social events that she already had planned. Ona would have learned the streets of downtown Manhattan in this way, even coming to recognize some of the people who crossed her path. Perhaps it was a young, free black man who tipped his hat to her. Perhaps she walked by the African Free School for black children, or as they said back then, for colored children, that had been created by the New York Manumission Society. This school ended up educating most of the black men who became well-known leaders during the 1800s. men including Alexander Crummell, Henry Highland Garnett, and James McCune Smith, among others. Ona still could not read or write, but she was observing, listening, and remembering exactly what students were supposed to be doing at all the New York schools. In June 1790, Ona may have picked up Nellie on Maiden Lane, very close to the time when a famous dinner took place at Thomas Jefferson's house. The dinner was not only famous because of the people who were there, Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. It was famous, indeed legendary, because of the consequences it had for the new country, the politicians representing the country, and the slaves who were not yet allowed to claim the country for themselves. Alexander Hamilton wanted the capital of the U.S. to remain in New York. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, both from Virginia, wanted the capital to be on the Potomac River, somewhere near Mount Vernon. Hamilton and Jefferson weren't fond of each other. But they also knew that they had to work together. Besides the location of the new country's capital, Hamilton's priority was the assumption of states' debts by the new federal government. In other words, he wanted the federal government to pay the bills racked up by the individual states during the Revolutionary War. Jefferson and Madison and most Southern leaders did not want this to happen because, number one, the Southern states did not owe as much money as the Northern states because of slavery. And number two, they didn't want to risk having the federal government grow more powerful than the states. Hamilton offered up a deal. The capital city could be on the Potomac if the federal government paid the debts. Jefferson and Madison said yes, and as a kicker, they agreed that Philadelphia would be the temporary capital of the U.S. for the 10 years it would take to build a new federal city on the Potomac. What did this have to do with Ona? Everything and nothing, all at the same daggone time. She had just moved from Mount Vernon to New York City. Then she'd moved from Cherry Street to Broadway. The household had always been planning on going to Mount Vernon for the summer months. She'd have to pack for that as well. And now these founding fathers had thrown yet another wrench into her life. Pshaw, she ain't had time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. The only glimmer of hope for Ona was that she was going to return to Philly, the place that offered many more opportunities to black people than anything offered in New York City and certainly in Virginia. Yeah, she didn't want to return to old Virginia. That old plantation home didn't sound so good to her. George Washington agreed with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. He wanted the nation's capital to be on the Potomac. He would do anything to be closer to his beloved Mount Vernon. But before the Washingtons could go back for the summer, another medical scare occurred. After the move to their home on Broadway, George again became sick. Influenza. He came down with the flu, which had recently spread through the city, perhaps because of his long illness during the previous year. George was susceptible to this virus, and by late April, he too was diagnosed with this deadly, did you hear me? I did say deadly flu. This time, people found out. Pennsylvania Congressman George Clymer wrote, "But it is observed here with a great deal of anxiety that his general health seems to be declining." What's going on over there on Broadway? Hundreds of New Yorkers died, young and old. George Washington was not one of them, lucky for him. He lost much of his hearing, but he survived. The summer move back to Mount Vernon had been postponed. Now, finally, in August of 1790, the Washingtons were able to leave New York for old Virginia. Everyone from the president to Ona was eager to take a step back from this very tumultuous life in the city. In 1 year, Ona had experienced more change and upheaval than most people did in a whole lifetime. And she did it all as a young teenager, serving the most powerful couple in the country. When Ona returned to Mount Vernon and hugged her mama, Betty, she would do so with the wiser eyes of someone who had seen much that could not be easily explained. And when she moved to Philly in the fall, she'd be wiser still. And that, my friends, is the end of that. So we're going to go ahead and close out. Thank you very much for letting us know what time it is, Mr. Computer. So you know what time it is. It's 9:30. It's time for us to close on out. And I'm going to repeat tonight our proverb of the day, Umtoto wa nyoka ni nyoka. The child of a snake is a snake. The child of a snake is a snake. Think about that and remember it. Okay? Mtoto wa nyoka ni nyoka. There you go. Don't mess around with no joker, because the child of a snake is a snake. So as we close out, you know what time it is and what you need to do. All you little children out there, it's time to take your little head and put it on your little pillow, on your little bed, close those your eyes, and wait for that big old sun to rise. And when you feel those sunbeams beaming down on your eyes, that's when it's time for you to rise and shine and greet the new day in a whole new way. Treat every day as if it's your last. Guaranteed you'll have a blast all through life with very little strife. And for you adults, what I need you to do is to go ahead and give us a like, a thumbs up, and then go ahead and subscribe to the Tubular Black Facts channel, where you get more information every single day. And in closing, I'll just say, may peace guide your way. We'll be black tomorrow at noon. Look for us then. And on the way out, I'll just say, Tutal Nana to David Doughty and Tutal Nana to Jamali Allen. Peace out, y'all.